The message arrived when the city was asleep. Ethan Hale was lying on his couch, half awake, staring at the ceiling, when his phone vibrated once and stopped. No calls came that late unless something was wrong. Expecting a work alert or a mistake. Instead, he saw an unknown number and a single line of text asking if he knew what had been done to him. Confused, he opened the attachment beneath it, and in that quiet moment, everything he believed in cracked. The document loaded slowly, as if giving him time to prepare, but nothing could have. It was a legal contract, clean and final. His company's name stood bold at the top. His company, or what used to be. As his eyes moved down the page, his breath grew shallow. Ownership percentages had changed. Its name was gone. At the bottom sat a familiar signature, firm and confident. Marcus Reed, his partner, his friend. The man who had built the company with him from nothing. Ethan sat up, heart pounding. He read the document again, faster this time, hoping he had misunderstood, but the truth stayed sharp and clear. The company had been transferred, sold, closed, and reborn under Marcus's sole control. It had happened weeks ago, quietly, legally, without Ethan ever knowing. He stood and paced the room, the cold floor biting his feet. His mind raced through memories, trying to find the moment this had begun. The late meetings Marcus insisted on handling alone. The sudden changes in tone. The way Marcus had stopped, asking for Ethan's opinion and started telling him what would happen. All the signs were there. Ethan had just trusted too much to see them. 10 years earlier, the company had been an idea scribbled on scrap paper at a small cafe. Ethan had been the dreamer, the planner, the one who believed they could do something better. Marcus had been the closer, the talker, the one who could sell ice to winter. Together, they worked long nights, missed holidays, and shared every risk. They shook hands on trust, not contracts. That was their rule. That was their bond. Now that bond felt like a lie. By sunrise, Ethan was standing outside the office building, staring at the glass doors like they might refuse him entry. Inside, the place felt different. The air was heavier. Its nameplate was gone. Its access card no longer worked. The receptionist avoided his eyes as she told him Marcus was in a meeting and unavailable. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply nodded and stepped outside again, the morning noise of the city crashing into him. Cars passed. Tipo walked by with coffee and purpose. No one knew his life had just been erased. Hours later, Marcus finally called. His voice sounded calm, almost kind, as if this were a normal business update. He explained everything carefully, using words like necessary, timing, and survival. The company was struggling, he said. Investors were nervous. Hard choices had to be made. Ethan was too slow, too cautious. Marcus had acted to save what they built. You should understand, Marcus said. I did this for the company. Ethan listened in silence, gripping the phone until his knuckles turned white. Not once did Marcus say sorry. Not once did he ask how Ethan felt. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It was smooth, polished, and cold. When the call ended, Ethan stood alone in the empty office he was no longer allowed to enter. The place still smelled of coffee and printer ink. His desk sat untouched, like a memory frozen in time. He placed his hand on it, feeling the familiar scratches from years of work. This had been his second home. Now it was proof that loyalty meant nothing without power. That night, sleep refused to come. Ethan lay awake, replaying every conversation, every laugh, every moment Marcus had called him a brother. Anger tried to rise, but it tangled with something deeper. A sharp sense of being made small, of being outplayed. He realized then that Marcus hadn't just taken a company. He had taken Ethan's identity. The next morning, Ethan returned to his apartment and began sorting through old files. Not with panic, but with focus. Emails, notes, financial records. He remembered now how Marcus had insisted on managing certain accounts, how some decisions were rushed through when Ethan was distracted or tired. At the time, it had felt like teamwork. Now it looked like strategy. Each discovery tightened something inside him. Marcus believed he was justified. That was the most painful part. In his own mind, he wasn't a traitor. He was a hero who had done what Ethan couldn't. That belief made the betrayal harder to accept, because it meant Marcus would never feel guilt. He would sleep well, convinced he had been right. Ethan stood by the window as night fell again, watching lights flicker on across the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was celebrating, planning the future, moving forward without him. The unfairness of it all pressed down hard, demanding an answer. That was when the thought arrived, clear and steady. If Marcus had rewritten the story, Ethan would learn to read the margins. If Marcus believed the past was settled, Ethan would prove that actions leave echoes. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about balance, about making sure the truth didn't stay buried under legal words and quiet deals. Ethan didn't know yet what he would do. He only knew one thing: it would not disappear. Ethan did not rush into action. He learned quickly that revenge demanded patience, not noise. Each morning he woke early, his mind already moving, replaying facts instead of feelings. The shock had faded. What remained was focus. He treated his loss like a problem to solve, not a wound to cry over. He started with habits. Marcus always moved in patterns. Ethan had spent 10 years beside him and knew the rhythm of his days. He knew when Marcus arrived at the office, when he met investors, when he felt confident, and when he grew careless. Confidence, Ethan realized, was Marcus's weakness. He believed the story was finished. That belief made him sloppy. Ethan rented a small workspace across town. Nothing fancy, just a desk, a chair, and silence. From there, he rebuilt his understanding of the company he had lost. He reviewed public filings, investor updates, and market moves. Each piece revealed something small but important. Marcus was expanding too fast. He was making promises that sounded strong but rested on thin ground. At night, Ethan wrestled with himself. He asked hard questions he had avoided during the day. What did he want? Justice or control? Truth or victory? Some nights anger surged, sharp and demanding. Other nights, doubt crept in. Was he becoming the kind of man he once despised? He remembered his father's words from years ago. Winning at any cost still costs something. The thought stayed with him, heavy but useful. It forced him to slow down when the urge to strike rose too fast. Marcus, meanwhile, played the role of success perfectly. Articles praised his leadership. Photos showed him smiling beside investors. The company's story had been rewritten, and Ethan was no longer part of it. That erasure burned more than the loss of money. It felt like being told his years of effort had never mattered. Ethan began reaching out quietly. Former clients, old contacts, people who trusted him even if the company no longer did. He didn't speak badly of Marcus. He didn't accuse or threaten. He listened. He asked questions. He noticed pauses in voices, moments of hesitation when Marcus's name came up. Patterns emerged, promises made quickly. Decisions pushed through faster than they should have been. Numbers that looked good on paper but felt rushed in practice. Marcus wasn't breaking the law outright. He was bending it, relying on charm and urgency to move people past their doubts. Ethan collected everything. Not to expose yet, but to understand. He built a quiet map of pressure points, places where truth and appearance didn't match. The more he learned, the clearer it became that Marcus believed speed would protect him. If he kept moving, no one would stop to question the ground beneath him. But Ethan questioned himself constantly. He imagined the end. Marcus exposed. Reputation cracked. Control lost. The image brought a brief sense of satisfaction, followed by an unexpected emptiness. He wondered if revenge would truly restore what he had lost or simply replace it with something colder. One evening, Ethan saw Marcus in person for the first time since the betrayal. It was accidental. It's a chance meeting at a networking event. Marcus spotted him across the room and froze for a moment before recovering his smile. He walked over as if nothing had changed. They spoke politely, carefully. Marcus asked how Ethan was doing, praised his talent, even suggested they might work together again someday. The words were smooth, but his eyes never rested. He was watching for anger, for weakness, for proof that Ethan was broken. Ethan gave him none. As Marcus walked away, Ethan felt a strange calm. The man he once trusted was still there, unchanged, convinced of his own rightness. That certainty made Ethan's path clearer. Marcus would never admit fault. He would only understand consequence. The planning intensified. Ethan rehearsed conversations in his head, weighed options, measured risks. He knew one wrong move could destroy him instead. Revenge was a blade that cut both ways. He couldn't act out of impulse. Everything had to be clean, slow, and undeniable. Still, the emotional cost grew. Sleep came in short bursts. His thoughts raced even when his body was still. He caught himself becoming distant from friends, distracted in simple moments. Revenge demanded attention, and it took that attention from everything else. One night, Ethan stared at his reflection in the dark window of his workspace. He barely recognized the man looking back. The fire in his eyes was sharp, but joy was missing. He wondered how long a person could live driven by a single purpose, before it hollowed them out. He almost stopped then. Almost. But then a former employee reached out. Someone Marcus had pushed aside after the takeover. Someone whose concerns had been ignored. They spoke carefully, afraid, but honest. The story matched what Ethan had seen. Corners were being cut. Pressure was constant. Doubt was growing. That conversation changed everything. This was no longer just about Ethan. Marcus's choices were affecting others now. People who trusted. The company who believed in the vision Ethan had helped build. That knowledge shifted the weight of Ethan's decision. Revenge wasn't just personal anymore. It was tied to responsibility. Yet the question remained the same. How far was too far? Ethan prepared for the moment when action would be possible. He imagined standing at the edge, ready to step forward or turn back. He knew that once he crossed that line, there would be no clean return. The story would end one way or another. As the days passed, the tension inside him tightened like a wire pulled too far. He was closer than ever to acting, but also more aware of what it might cost. Revenge promised relief, but it demanded a price paid in character. Ethan didn't know yet which version of himself would win. He only knew the moment of choice was coming fast. The moment arrived quietly, without warning, on an ordinary afternoon. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the final folder on his screen. Every file was there, every detail aligned. The path was clear. One decision stood between thought and action. He could expose Marcus now. The evidence showed a pattern. Not crime in the loud sense, but pressure, shortcuts, and promises stacked too high. Enough to make investors step back. Enough to crack trust. Enough to end the story Marcus had written for himself. Ethan's hands hovered over the keyboard, steady but cold. This was the point of no return. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. He opened it without thinking. It was a short note, careful in tone. The sender introduced himself as an investigator reviewing the company's recent expansion. He asked if Ethan would be willing to share insight into the early structure of the business. Nothing more. No threat, no pressure. Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes. This was it. He stood and walked outside, letting the city noise rush around him. Cars passed, voices mixed. Life moved forward, unaware of the decision forming in his chest. He remembered the early days again, the cafe, the handshake. The belief that trust was stronger than paper. That memory no longer hurt. It felt distant, like a chapter already closed. Ethan returned to his desk and opened the folder once more. He read through it slowly, not for confirmation, but for clarity. With each page, something unexpected happened. The anger that had fueled him for weeks began to fade, not disappear but loosen its grip. He realized something then. If he acted out of revenge alone, Marcus would remain the center of his story. Every future move would still be tied to the betrayal. Ethan didn't want that. He didn't want his life shaped forever by another man's choices. But walking away completely felt wrong too. There was a third option. Not destruction, not silence, balance. Ethan answered the investigator's message. He agreed to speak, but only to explain how the company had once been built, the values that had guided it, and the risks of moving too fast. He shared facts, not accusations, history, not emotion. Truth, without intent to punish. Days passed. The effects were subtle at first, meetings were delayed, questions increased. Marcus's public confidence remained, but cracks formed underneath. Investors grew cautious. Expansion slowed. The story Marcus controlled began to change, not because Ethan attacked it, but because it could no longer outrun reality. Marcus called Ethan late one night. This time, his voice lacked its usual smooth edge. He asked why questions were being raised. He asked if Ethan had said something. Ethan answered honestly. He said he told the truth when asked. Nothing more. Silence filled the line. Marcus finally spoke, quieter now. He said he never meant to erase Ethan. He said pressure had pushed him. Fear, the need to win. He still believed he had done what was necessary. Ethan listened. When the call ended, he felt no victory. But he felt lighter. Weeks later, the company announced a pause in its aggressive growth. Leadership was restructured. Marcus stayed, but his control narrowed. The empire didn't fall. It adjusted. The damage stopped spreading. Ethan watched from a distance. He focused on his own work, building something new, slower, grounded in lessons paid for with pain. Trust came carefully now. Agreements were clear. Boundaries were firm. He worked with people who valued honesty over speed. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Ethan realized he hadn't thought about revenge all day. That was the true ending, not satisfaction, not regret. Release, Marcus never apologized publicly. Ethan never demanded it. They became two men shaped by the same moment, moving in different directions. One carried the weight of justification. The other carried the clarity of choice. Ethan understood then that revenge had tempted him because it promised control. But control gained through harm would have hollowed him out. Walking away with truth intact had cost less and given more. The betrayal would always be part of his story, but it no longer defines the ending. And that, Ethan knew, was the only victory that lasted.